Apple prepares to drop the new iPhone. Amazon kicks off the holiday shopping season. And an optimistic take on the pandemic. The cavalry is coming. Here's what you need to know. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Tuesday, October 13th. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Hi, Carlo.
Good morning, Jill. How are you on this rainy Tuesday? It feels like we're living in London over here. It's been this background rain for the last 2 days, right?
Yeah, but it's surprising because I feel like we've gone a month without any rain.
Yeah.
So it's just, I think we
cozy.
kind of need it. I am wearing a turtleneck today, and I made that decision. I was like, I don't even care how warm it is, even if it's a warm rain. I'm wearing a turtleneck.
You do you, girl.
Okay, let's get to some news. It is day 2 of the Supreme Court confirmation hearings for Judge Amy Coney Barrett. Yesterday featured hours of opening statements. So Republicans primarily focused on Barrett's qualifications. Democrats slammed her as an ideologue who would overturn Obamacare and also Roe v. Wade. Barrett sat quiet and masked for most of the day. Today, though, she's going to get a little bit more speaking time when the floor opens to questions. She did give an opening statement, though, and she took her mask off for that. And it was notable that she was wearing a mask when some senators were not wearing masks. And, of course, it was her nomination ceremony that is seen as this big super spreader event from a couple weeks ago.
You couldn't, like I've said before, you couldn't write this. It would be too ridiculous. It wouldn't even get past an editor. I love that Ted Cruz was participating in this remotely because he had come into contact with an infected person, right? Which is obviously the responsible thing to do. That infected person was Senator Mike Lee, who was there in person, took his mask off.
I'm laughing because it's so ridiculous.
While he potentially still has the freaking coronavirus, which, like you said, he got from going out around the White House super spreader event, just sort of hugging and kissing everybody he saw. We shouldn't even laugh because the recklessness is just absolutely mind-boggling with some of these people.
Mark Meadows, the chief of staff, actually wouldn't do an interview. A bunch of reporters caught up with him in the halls of the White House yesterday.
Saw that, yeah.
And he was wearing a mask, as he should, when he was walking through. And they said, we have a couple questions. So he went to take off his mask, and you could almost hear this collective, and they're like, no, put your mask back on. And he actually, because of course he's been in close contact with the president who had coronavirus, and he actually refused to put his mask back on and wouldn't answer questions with it on. So there you go. He left.
Children.
Okay, so Carlo, yesterday we were talking about this sense that next summer potentially might be a time when this country starts returning to any sense of normalcy. There's a new piece in the New York Times that echoes that. It's from Don McNeil, who's this veteran Times journalist on the medical beat. I'm not sure if we have any listeners who've been with us for a while. He was the guest on those podcasts, the daily podcasts that we recommended a while back at the start of this pandemic.
Oh, really? I remember that. Oh, I didn't put the two and two together there. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of he's been my go-to authority on this stuff from a journalistic perspective. And he actually wrote a relatively optimistic piece on where things stand right now. And he says, quote, "The cavalry is coming. All we have to do is get through the winter." By cavalry, he means two things. He means a vaccine and the widespread distribution of these monoclonal antibodies, which are showing to be among the most effective treatment. It's what the president got when he was in the hospital, and it could potentially act as this bridge to a vaccine. Carlo, you sent me this article last night so that we could talk about it today on the podcast. Yeah. I read it before bed, and as I messaged you, I slept a little bit easier. Not a lot easier, but I was like, okay, if Don McNeil feels okay about things, I guess I can too.
I did too, and I think I would recommend everybody read this piece because it's long, but it's very there's just he makes a lot of different points. One of the points that he made, which I think is worth repeating, is he just sort of talked about the how mask wearing has become just sort of a part of our lives in such a short period of time, right? The percentage of people wearing masks out in stores and out in public in February, it was like basically 0%, right? Now in October, the latest surveys show 85 to 90% of people are putting masks on when they go out in public. That is an incredible shift just in terms of sort of like public health and public knowledge. We focus on these idiots like Senator Mike Lee and some others who can't even, do the basics. But how about the vast majority of people who just wear a mask when they go out? They don't complain. They do it because it's a sign of respect and acknowledgement that they actually live in a society that other people live in. So I thought that was just a good point that he made. McNeil also made the point that as bad as this winter may be, and he wasn't saying that we're out of the woods by any stretch, right? He was basically making the point that this winter is going to be tough, but it's unlikely that it's going to be as bad as last spring, and that's because there are these treatments that are now available: remdesivir, the steroids, the antibody cocktails that are becoming more widespread. Also, there's fewer older people who are getting infected. That's a good sign. That's because in a lot of ways, nursing homes are better prepared. There's just a lot more information out there than there was in the spring. And the other point that he made, which I think we have made on this podcast before, Jill, is there's no longer this risk of what they're calling. Well, there's no longer a huge risk of what they're calling this twindemic, where you get the a resurgence in COVID cases at the same time as flu, influenza cases. And the reason why that is because, the flu in the Northern Hemisphere is seeded basically by people from the Southern Hemisphere coming here who have it and then, leaving it here when they leave. But there's nobody here from the Southern Hemisphere, right? There's no tourists. So that means public health officials are less worried that we're going to get this resurgence in flu cases. Plus, a ton of people are getting their flu shots. So he just I thought he made a very good case for why it's not all doom and gloom. Obviously, we got a long way to go here, but they're starting to feel like some light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the medical breakthroughs and that the pace at which we're finding some sort of treatments, I think that seems to be the most optimistic take on it, the mask wearing. And I'm going to just throw one opposite end thing, like the craziest stat I've heard in a long time. So let's take your optimism, Carlo, and I'm going to turn it right around. We usually say turn that frown right around, but I'm like, turn that smile right around. I saw this crazy thing. Coronavirus apparently can survive on phones and banknotes for 28 days.
So here's the thing with
gross.
that. Don't worry about that. I'm glad you mentioned that because I actually meant to sort of debunk this on the pod the other day.
Debunk.
They did this study with in like a lab setting, right? So there was no ultraviolet light, which we know helps kill the virus. So I just think we have to be very careful with these studies because a lot of times they're done in settings that don't actually mirror real world settings. And I think what that does is it ends up
But as
people.
I look at my phone and how many times I touch it and where I bring it, and the fact that this thing isn't seeing the light of day today, like it's not in UV light. You know what I mean?
Right.
I just think it's a reminder. Let's not let our guards down here.
Sure,
Wash hands, sanitize. If you can get your hands on Clorox, do it. Okay. But anyway, I also highly recommend that piece from Don McNeil, and it just good perspective on where things stand right now. A lot of other important stories today on media, tech, entertainment. Let's start with Facebook, which will be banning content that denies or distorts the Holocaust. This is a major reversal for the company after years of pointing to Holocaust denial as a form of protected speech on the platform. Facebook cited a recent survey that found almost a quarter of Americans aged 18 to 39 believe the genocide of millions of Jews and others at the hands of Nazis was either a myth or exaggerated. Again, a quarter of Americans aged 18 to 39 just believe that the Holocaust either didn't happen or that it was greatly exaggerated.
I remember when that survey came out a couple of weeks ago, and I actually meant to do it on the podcast, and I think I must have just forgotten. It just probably got wrapped up in all the other news. It's just a mind-boggling survey to me. Joe, we talked about this before, right? But the speech issue when it comes to big tech, especially Facebook, is really tricky. Obviously, it's totally in a private company's right to say they don't want to profit off of something like QAnon or Holocaust denial, right? There's no constitutional issue there. And I think all of us would argue that there's some speech that isn't worth protecting. I would certainly put Holocaust denial in that category. The problem is that content distribution now is effectively in the hands of like 2 or 3 companies, right? It's like Google, Facebook, maybe Twitter. So what happens when there's political pressure to ban a different form of speech, right? One that's not as cut and dry as the Holocaust. Do you want Mark Zuckerberg making those decisions? I'm only saying that just because it's obviously I think I don't think that there's an issue with this. I don't think that there's any reason why you should be able to spout Holocaust denial on Facebook. But there's trickier issues at play here, and I don't have the answers for them, obviously, but it's just something to keep in mind.
I have a lot of thoughts on this. As a Jewish person, as somebody who has visited numerous concentration camps, I've done extensive research on it. I've won 2 Emmys for a series I put together, having visited those concentration camps. I went on the March of the Living, which is the idea being that there's going to be very few survivors left just by virtue of age. So then if you can go to if you could go to Auschwitz, for example, with a survivor, then you become this next generation of survivor because you were there too with a survivor who told you, I mean, I was there with this, who said, this is where they tattooed my arm. And you look at the arm and it's just, it really hits home more than reading about it. Look, it used to be if you were any of these types of things, a Holocaust denial, whatever else, it would be, just say you were like one crazy person, you could tell maybe you're a family member or a friend or whatever. Right. Now you can spew it to millions of people. And you come up with something. I've seen. I don't know if you've ever seen any conspiracy theories online. Like they find like a crazy stat or like a crazy picture where they're like, you see that this is fake or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I've seen those with September 11th being an inside job. It's just the same type of stuff is what they're doing, and they spread. And it's they're the quickest things. They spread faster than most other things online.
And the other problem, Jill, not to interrupt you, but it's the algorithms, right? Because you start going down a Facebook or a YouTube rabbit hole about Holocaust denial, then your recommended videos are, did you know that September 11th was a hoax, or did you know about this, the Democratic pedophiles who are eating children or whatever? Like that's the business model of these companies is basically in direct conflict with keeping this stuff from spreading, right?
And I would say, just not to take any pressure off of these social media companies, but this is where we need better education. I mean, schools just need to do a better job of teaching about things like the Holocaust, September 11th. There are places in Europe right now where they just won't teach about the Holocaust because they think that it's offensive to other groups. This is a real problem. Things happen that are factual that we have to learn about so that they don't happen again. Okay, I'm gonna I could get really fired up about this. But anyway, last week, Disney announced that its much anticipated new Pixar film, Soul, would bypass movie theaters and head right to Disney Plus for a Christmas Day premiere. Well, now Disney says it's going to be doing a major restructuring of its media and entertainment divisions in order to make streaming its primary focus, accelerating a shift away from the big screen that could be disastrous for cinemas. Wow, that's huge news.
It is. It's not, and I don't think it's getting the play that it deserves. Think about that, right? Disney, the Walt Disney Company is basically saying, we're going all in on streaming here. The reason why that could be disastrous for movie theaters, obviously, it's pretty much kids' movies and superhero movies that are now the only thing that really even make money in theaters anymore. And this was even pre-COVID, right? So if you don't have a Pixar movie to count on for Christmas, that's just the worst thing these companies need. And they were obviously, as we've been saying already, really in dire straits. You got to wonder, Jill, is this the beginning of the end of movie theaters? I mean, I don't think they're going to go away entirely because I think there's people like me who like going to the movies and see it as sort of like a form of I don't know, entertainment. Like a form of relaxing. And there's always going to be a business for that, but I think it is possible and likely that we're now witnessing a major industry retrenchment here. And this news from Disney going a long way, I think, towards whatever's going to happen with the movie theater industry, it's going to happen sooner rather than later now.
I think it was Brandon Katz from The Observer. Forgive me for potentially getting the person on wrong, but we had a really smart journalist on Cheddar talking about the future of movie theaters, and he made a point that potentially you're in a situation where some of these theaters are going to go under, but you're still going to have the real estate, and it's likely who's going to go in to snatch them up. Companies like Disney or Amazon or Apple that are going to kind of go in and say, all right, now we're going to own the whole thing, right? We're going to make the movie, we're going to distribute it, we're going to sell you the popcorn, we're going to sell you all the merchandise right outside of the movie theater. So just,
That's already happening.
It is already happening, yes. Netflix could do it too.
In New York, yep.
And so it's just what I think movie theaters, because there are people like you, there's people that will enjoy that. I think that they'll exist, but just, the way that they exist now might change. Carlo, the day is finally here. I know you've been complaining about your broken iPhone for months, at least it seems like. Well, now's your chance to trade up. Apple set to unveil its first 5G-enabled iPhone at a virtual event today. It is the most highly anticipated new iPhone model since at least 2017, and Apple is counting on millions of iPhone users who've been holding onto their devices for longer than ever to finally cave and splurge on this new redesigned phone. The live stream of their event is at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So we'll get all the details then.
Yes, we will. I saw a interesting survey yesterday that was pitched to me from Global Wireless Solutions that found 49% of consumers believe the phone that they have is 5G capable. So there's still a long way to go on sort of like the 5G information campaign, I think, from the big telecom companies. A lot of people don't really I don't even really understand what it. I mean, I understand that it's faster, but that is the big thing this phone that's going to be different about this phone. It'll be interesting to see early sales figures too. I mean, are people in the mood right now to fork over what'll probably be something in the neighborhood of $1,000 for a new phone, right? I mean, we're still I don't know if we're technically in a recession anymore, but the economy is not particularly conducive to that.
Yeah, I mean, I would think technology, though, is one of those things people will spend on just because we're on our phones so much. But we'll see. On that note, you made about what are people willing to pay for these days. Eye doctors around the country are reporting a resurgence in interest for LASIK surgery, especially among younger people, with the average age for the procedure now 34 years old, according to Bloomberg. One of the reasons, this foggy glasses phenomenon that you get when wearing a mask.
I haven't. Neither of us wear glasses, so I think it's I'm not that familiar, but I have heard from bespectacled friends that it's really annoying when you get the mask and the glasses on at the same time, and it just like fogs up like a windshield. But actually, the bigger reason has to do with what's something Jill, you and I have been talking about, which is just the K-shaped economic recovery, right? If you live in this country and you've been able to keep your job and your income through the pandemic, you're not spending your disposable money on travel, right? So you have a lot of people have some extra cash, and what are they doing? They're putting it towards things like home improvement projects. That's why we've been seeing companies like Home Depot and Lowe's do so well, new cars, and even elective surgery like LASIK. So I'm always just sort of fascinated by these economic trend stories.
You know what it is? It's like the unintended consequences of something.
Yeah.
When we first were talking about the pandemic back in February, and I was like, LASIK surgery is going to go up because people are going to be wearing masks and their glasses are going to get foggy. You'd probably think I'm genuinely insane. I've noticed, so I don't wear glasses, but I do wear sunglasses occasionally, and I do see it. If you breathe heavy or something, the whole thing fogs up. Anyway, okay, by one measure, the holiday shopping season starts today, okay? Amazon, we know, postponed its annual Prime Day over the summer because it was dealing with an overloaded supply chain. Well, guess what? The two-day sales event is officially here. More than 1 million items on Amazon are discounted, including these surprise, quote-unquote, lightning deals for Prime members. Things like fire pits, vacuums, and electronics expected to be among the big sellers.
Some of the TV deals went live last night. I was sort of, when I was doing the prepping for today, I was just looking around. A 32-inch Roku TV for $98. That's a good deal. I gotta say, if I were in the market for a TV, that's I would probably get that. But yeah, retailers are banking on this holiday season, Jill. Just because of how weird this year has been. But who knows, right? I mean, this is going to be a real interesting next couple months in terms of this shift to e-commerce. Does it really? Does it carry through the holiday season? I guess we'll see. My guess is probably yes.
Normally I feel like Prime Day, I would like to take credit for this, but it was not me. Someone had said it's kind of like Amazon's garage sale, where they're just like, take this old thing that nobody wanted to buy, a food mixer that's tie-dyed or whatever.
Right.
In this case, though, I think there are deals to be had, especially if you're looking for an Amazon product, right? Like if you want an Echo device or something, you could probably get a pretty good deal. And finally, we just wanted to end quickly by mentioning Roberta McCain, the mother of John McCain and the matriarch of the McCain family, has died at the age of 108. Cindy McCain announced the passing of her mother-in-law, calling her a role model and a friend. Once asked by Vogue to explain how she remains so active at such an old age, Roberta said, quote, "I don't do anything I'm supposed to do. I don't exercise, and today I've already eaten half a box of caramel popcorn. Honey, I've had a dream life, and it was all luck." Oh my gosh, I love it. I mean, I just got the chills reading that.
Yeah. 108 years old, incredible. Another great anecdote in the obituary for Roberta McCain. When she was in Paris in her 80s, she couldn't get a rental car because she was so old. So she just walked down the street and bought one off the lot and just drove it around, which I respect. But yeah, if you remember Roberta McCain, I remember seeing her at John McCain's funeral 2 years ago when she was 106 years old, and I just remember thinking, like, how remarkable to outlive your 81-year-old son, right? It's like wild. So obviously our best to the McCain family, but an incredible woman.
Yeah, I mean, that at 108, it's a celebration of life, right? I mean, just cheers to her for a life well lived. Okay, that is what you need to know for Tuesday, October 13th.
Thanks, guys.